Hello, and welcome to the Moms Love Coaching Podcast, where we talk about self-care from the inside out for moms. I'm your host, Carrie McFarland, along with Angie Turgeon-Ledoux. We are certified life coaches and moms, and in this podcast, we'll go beyond the take a spa day advice and talk about real and sustainable ways that you can feel better, be happier, and stay out of overwhelm and burnout. You spend your life taking care of everyone else. In this podcast, each week, it's all about you taking care of you with no guilt and no apologies. We're so happy that you've decided to spend this time with us, so go ahead and grab your favorite cup of coffee, find a comfortable place, and get ready to spend the next 30 minutes focusing on the most important person in your life, you. Welcome, everybody, to the Moms Love Coaching Podcast, where we teach self-care from the inside out. And today we are going to be talking about our favorite topic, anxiety. Yes.
Yeah.
I love anxiety. Angie loves anxiety. Who doesn't love anxiety?
Yepers.
And here's what we've discovered about anxiety. When other people have it, you absorb their anxiety, so it's even worse. You feel it even worse. Does this happen to you? It's like you have your own level of anxiety, whether it's low or medium or high, and then somebody else near you gets anxious, like physically near you gets anxious, whether you know them or not. If you know them, it's even worse. But even if you don't know them, you feel the anxiety, and then you just start ramping up like well, maybe this is bigger than I thought, and I need to be anxious, and you just get anxious. That's why there's that Instagram, maybe it was TikTok or Instagram challenge of the fake panic. Have you seen that?
No.
It's funny.
It sounds awful.
It's videos of people just like sitting there, like they set up their camera, right? They're setting it up. So they set up their camera so you can like see people just sitting on the couch together, just chilling out, watching TV or doing whatever, just chilling out. And all of a sudden, one person will get up and just start screaming. And
Oh, yes, I have.
And the other person gets up and goes like, oh my God. It's like people like falling in the pool and running into doors and like.
Oh my God. Like they've seen a snake or something. Or it's the same idea as, walking down the street and looking up. And then before you know it, more people are standing around.
Yeah. It's like, what are you looking at? What is that? What is that? Yeah. It's the same thing with anxiety. So I've realized that I think most of my anxiety has either come from or been enhanced by other people without me knowing. Like I just thought it was all me, and I realize now that I have sort of gotten my anxiety under control, that it really was coming from other people. And I was just absorbing that and internalizing it as my own, and then feeling super anxious and not being able to get out of it because the person near me was still anxious. So it was like, until they calmed down, then I couldn't calm down. It was just like this dual effect. Has that ever happened to you?
So, yeah, I really wish that I had understood it. And to be clear, we're not talking about somebody with anxiety disorder, which
this is just
a different level. Right. This is just normal human and anxiety that you don't realize is at play. And that is, I looked up the definition of anxiety. It's that feeling of worry, nervousness. This is what Oxford Dictionary says. Or unease, typically about an imminent event or something with an uncertain outcome. Before we started recording, Carrie and I were talking. I was telling her about when we used to, and this still happens, when we would go places with the kids, and I would go into this frenzy of not wanting to come home to a sink full of dishes or unmade beds or whatever it was, and having to make 15 trips back into the house because I forgot something or needed to check to make sure that I'd turn off the coffee pot or, that sort of thing. And I realized now it was and I didn't really think that it was necessarily uncertain outcome, because like if we were going to my sister-in-law's house, it wouldn't necessarily or we were going to a wedding or something. That we had to get ready for an event like that. But I mean, this could happen just going, to Saturday morning soccer when they were little. But it is the stress of trying to move kids out the door.
Right.
They would get stressed, and then of course didn't help the situation because when I'm stressed, I'm a yeller, and so I'm upping the ante, and then it just it would be so uncomfortable, and like we'd all breathe a sigh of relief when the car was heading out the driveway and up the road. Like, whew, pressure cooker off. What makes me sad now is that if had I understood that was at play, then I could have said, okay, Angie, give yourself 10 extra minutes to get ready. Think through what needs to be done. Visualize walking out the door. How can this be? Oh, we're just going for a drive, and we have a place to go, and we're all going to be in the car, and everybody's going to get there on time, and none of all the other stuff matters.
Right.
It was like,
right.
Oh my gosh, because when you're in anxiety, it just makes everything else, like it heightens and amplifies everything else around you. So you overreact.
Yeah.
That's my story.
It's funny that you use that example, because that was like a big thing for me, is getting to places on time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was my perceived expectations of other people, whether they were family or not. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And wanting to meet those expectations, but not really conscious of that. Like, this is me looking back on it now, but there was just some like overall, I don't know, looming bad thing that I was trying to avoid by being late. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about it, who cares? Who cares if I was late, right? I mean, what difference does it make, really, if I'm 5 minutes late to something? Is it really the end of the world, But for some reason, I was so caught up in having, to be on time. And I guess it's all wrapped up in like your worth as a mother, right? If you can't get your kids out the door in a certain way and have them be a certain way, and then, not be able to get there on time, then you're not doing your job right. I guess that's what it all comes down to, is that you feel judged if you don't do those things the way that other people expect you to. But again, like looking back on that, so what if people judge you? Right? I mean, if you really get down to it, okay, so they judge you and they're like, wow, you can't even get it together. You can't even get your kids out the door. Whatever. Yeah, I couldn't get my kids out the door. You want to come over and help me next time to get my kids out the door? That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Right.
It's like we're so focused on like making sure that nobody thinks anything bad of us or that we don't do anything wrong, that we just whip ourselves into a frenzy and judge ourselves horribly. And then we feel all that anxiety. And then on top of it, if somebody else is with you trying to help you get your kids out the door, they could be super anxious about it as well, for probably all the same reasons. But then that just layers onto your own anxiety. And then it's just so out of control that now you're yelling at the kids. Now you're throwing things in the car. Now you're rushing back and forth. And it's just like, you're trying to outrun your anxiety by moving fast and let's get going and get your shoes on and get your coat on. We got to get in the car. We got to get your stuff.
Just you talking about it.
We got to do this. Right. It's just like, yeah. And then everybody's in the car and then everybody's mad or upset. Right. That's when the crying starts. And that's when you're not going the right way. And why are you going this way? And it just continues on and on and on.
That's when you realize the shin guards are back on the counter and
yes,
the water bottle has been left behind. The dog wasn't put in.
We forgot the blankie. Right.
Exactly.
That was always ours. We forgot the blankie, which inevitably would, we'd find that out after we were driving for 10 minutes. And then somebody in the back would start screaming that they didn't have their blankie. So then we'd have to turn around and get it. But then that was a whole nother thing. And then, so now we're really going to be late. But it's like, if you just stop and say to yourself, first, like, you just breathe
and just say, okay, I'm super anxious right now. Why am I feeling this way? And just stop yourself and think about what it is you're anxious about. And you're probably going to come up with something like, we're going to be late, right? That's your thought, is that you're going to be late. But then go deeper and say, why does that matter? So you're late. Who cares? Why does that matter? And like, that's the answer that you're going to give yourself, is, that's the piece that you got to recognize and realize, that it's really just all stuff in our head that we've been conditioned to think over the years, and question, is that even relevant? Is it right?
I would even say that you might not even not be aware that you are anxious or that you're worrying. It might feel like you're really mad. You're feeling really impatient. It might be that you might feel overwhelmed. And all of those are indicators that there's, take a breath, take a beat. Because darn well, if you're feeling that and you're the adult, your kids are probably feeling that too.
Right.
We do have this thing. So when I was an assistant principal, I often dealt with kids who weren't regulated, who were having a hard time with their behavior and their self-control. And one of the things that, one of the strategies was, as the child was escalating, the adult de-escalates. So the adult stays regulated. So if a kid is yelling at you, if you're yelling back at the kid, you're just feeding the whatever that is going on for that kiddo. And if you start talking to that child in a soft tone and you lower your voice and your movements are very calm, and you like, one of the things we would do is talk through, like, I'm going to put my hand here now. Or I'm going to walk over to this side of the room. So you're sort of narrating what you're doing, and it's all serving to just calm down the whole situation and help the child find within themselves their regulation, because it's regulation. Being regulated there's something that happens on a like a spidey sense level. It's not, it's like a sixth sense that and I can't articulate it any better than that right now, but that you're picking up on those nonverbals. It's that nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
So if you're anxious in a situation, the other person in the situation is going to follow your lead.
Right.
And if you're calming yourself, or you're breathing, like, one of the things you can do is just start to breathe very intentionally. You don't even have to say a word. You just have to start breathing. And because a lot of times when we're in high anxiety, we stop breathing. We hold our breath.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
or breathe like really shallow and quick. Yeah.
Yes. These are just a few of the tricks I picked up working with kids who really struggled. I mean, and then you have we would have parents come in who obviously were very concerned about their kiddos' behavior. And, either they were focusing that energy to outward, like coming at me, or they were mad at the kid, or sometimes it was just basically about, they were so overwhelmed themselves as the parent in the situation. A lot of like bad self-talk,
yeah.
So a lot of negativity. Yeah. So all of these things, I mean, who knew that job was such a good learning ground? Yeah.
I know. I mean, if you pick apart any job, you learn lots of things about other people and yourself that you never would have thought of, right? I mean, you're just being exposed to all different things that you wouldn't necessarily be exposed to if you just were in your house all day,
Sure.
But yeah, it's interesting. You can easily have your anxiety be ramped up by kids too, like you were saying, right? Because if you're not aware of it, it's just, I think it's just a natural tendency. When somebody is acting that way, it's just the natural tendency that you mirror that back to them and act that way. That's why it's so, if you're not conscious of it and you're not used to it and you don't practice it, that's just what people do, because that is just the default. But to get out of that, you need to be conscious of it and that doesn't always happen in the moment
Right.
either, right?
Right.
That can happen later. So you
Mhm.
can have that interaction with a kid or with an adult or, anybody, and go through your default motions and mirror their behavior and feel their anxiety as your own. And then later on realize, oh, I see what happened there, right?
Mhm.
And that's fine, right? It's the awareness that is the first piece that is so important. And whether that happens in the moment or it happens later that day or it happens even a week later, it doesn't matter, because once you're aware, like once you have that awareness and you're like, oh, I see, it will be easier to be more intentional about your actions when that happens. And it doesn't mean that the next time you still might mirror it, but you'll be aware maybe a little quicker. Maybe it will happen an hour later or
Mhm.
by the end of the day or something like that, right?
Mhm.
Until you get to the point where it's happening in the moment and you either can stop yourself and switch, or you just realize it right off the bat and you can be intentional about how you want to respond. And all that does is it keeps you in control, which makes you feel better, right? You're not
Mhm.
really doing it for the other person, although it does help the other person as well, but you're really doing it for yourself to feel better and not spiral. Because when you can be in regulation of yourself, then that energy is going to go out towards people, and then they can start mirroring you instead of you mirroring them, right?
Mhm.
And so wherever you go, it's going to be calmer because you're calmer, and people will tend to act that way around you, instead of
Right.
like you're wound up like a top and everywhere you go is chaos, right? That's part of
Right.
the reason. So if you're calmer, things will tend to be a little calmer around you.
Right. It's like, well, you were telling that story about arriving at the airport. You were just like,
Right.
"Oh, where is everybody? We're on the plane already, ma'am."
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah, I know. I was just, so I was sitting, we were talking off, before we started this. So I'm right now traveling for work. And so I am in Chicago, and I was flying in from St. Louis, and I was in an area in the airport that had plugs, because I needed to be on my laptop and stuff, and not all the chairs had plugs. So I was close to my gate, but I wasn't at my gate, and I was just in this little area. And I thought that they were boarding at a certain time. So when a certain time came up, I was like, all right, well, I'll just, pack up, go to the restroom, walk over, and, get on with everybody. And when I got over there, it was empty. And the people at the counter were looking at me like I was, like, where were you? And I said, oh, I thought you were boarding now. And they said, no, we already boarded. And I was like, oh, well, can I still get on the plane? And they're like, yes, but they were wound up about it, but I wasn't. So
right.
I just didn't really care. So I just was like, all right, cool. So I got on the plane. And honestly, it was awesome because I didn't have to fight through the crowd. I didn't have to wait in the line as everybody's getting on the plane and putting their bags in the thing. And then you're waiting, and then you're getting hit in the face with somebody's bag. And, it's just chaos and stuff. I just walked up to the gate, did my boarding pass, walked onto the plane, got in my seat, was super quiet. Everybody was already seated. And then 2 minutes later, the plane took off. It was the best.
It's awesome. It's
It
awesome.
worked out.
Did you have your carry-on?
I had checked my bag, but I had a backpack.
Okay.
Yeah, but that just goes under the seat. So I didn't have to put anything above.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That might have been a little more stressful because I'm sure it was all full. But yeah, I make sure I don't have to put anything in the overhead because that's
Yeah.
just a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it was like the best. Now, if that had happened like 5 years ago, I would have been freaking out. Like, I wouldn't have freaked out until I got there because I didn't know.
Right.
But I would have freaked out, and I would have been like, oh my God, I almost missed the plane. And blah, 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 blah. But, and then just been wound up until I got landed, But now I'm just like, all right, well, can I still get on the plane? All right, cool. I'll get on the plane.
So that only has to happen to me once, and it happened to me a couple of years ago. I thought my bus left at 4:30. So we left the house at 4 o'clock, and it was leaving at like 4:05, anyway, we got
Whoops.
there, and the bus, like, I didn't have to buy my ticket. I had my ticket online, but the bus he's like, ooh, we almost were leaving. And then, so I got on, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, note to self, always double, triple, quadruple check the time, because I hated that feeling. Like, I was fine until I wasn't. And I realized it as we were heading out. It was like, I knew there was another stop further down the interstate, that because those, the coach buses don't drive as fast as a truck can, right? So the pickup. So I knew that my husband could have brought me down to the next stop, and it wouldn't have been a problem. I could have still gotten on. But so that's why I was probably not freaking out as much. But that feeling of being late or missing the connection, oh, I hate it. So I overfunction. That's my strategy, is to like overcheck and not trust myself, and that's the anxiety too. So and then I think with kids, ooh.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. It's like, you don't trust yourself, right? So if you can't trust yourself, then you don't feel safe, and if you don't feel safe, then you're going to feel anxious. Right. And it's all tied into how we're conditioned as kids about being late. Being late is bad. Being late is bad. You got to be on time, right? You can't be late for school. You can't be late for class. You can't be late for bus. You can't be late, right? I mean, it's like,
it's a character flaw.
Yes.
To be a late person.
Yeah. Like, think about people who are always late, right? What is the first thing you think about them? That they're irresponsible, and right. They're irresponsible. They don't care about me. They don't care about my time, right? They don't, right? It's like you have all these like negative judgments.
They're not organized.
Right. And so when you're late, it's like all those things kind of flood into your subconscious, and you just don't, like, you just want to avoid that. But if you come, like it's a narrow miss, you're like, oh my goodness, Yeah. So I'll tell you a funny story. So anybody who's listened to us or has seen any of my blogs or my emails, you know that I always talk about feeling your feelings, and that feelings are called feelings because we literally feel them in our bodies. And the fastest way to get through a feeling is to feel them all the way through. So figure out where it is in your body. Is it in your chest? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your throat? Is it in your head? Right. And then just paying attention to how it feels and how it moves through your body until it's either dissipated or just gone. Right. And so that's how you process an emotion. And that is the fastest way to get through it. It's like, it gets worse if we resist it, if we think we shouldn't be feeling it. So I used to be much more anxious about everything a few years ago. And I really think what has helped me immensely is we got a dog a few years ago, and I wanted the dog. But after we had the dog and the reality of having the dog set in, the reality of, I can't control this dog. I don't know what this dog is going to do. I can't control it barking. It's going to get up in the middle of the night and I won't be able to sleep. Like, how big is this dog going to get? One of my daughters didn't like the dog. It was like a mess. And I was a complete wreck for like 3 weeks, maybe even 4 weeks. And my anxiety was like through the roof. I tell people, like, I had a panic attack for like 2 weeks straight about this dog. Couldn't stop thinking about it. I was super anxious. My heart was beating. I was breathing shallow, like all the things. And, it was hard to concentrate. And I'm like, we shouldn't have got this dog. And I was judging myself, and I was like beating myself up for doing this. And that was the wrong decision, and blah, blah, blah. So I went through this for like 2 weeks. And every day I would either try to sit and feel it or journal it out. So I would write out how I was feeling. So I would say, I would say all sorts of things about the dog, and I just wouldn't even filter myself. dropped the F-bomb. I was like, what am I doing? And I would, I would track how it was feeling and where it was in my body, but I would write it out. And I did that like every single day. And I just kept coming back to breathing and saying, telling myself, this is how I'm feeling right now. There's nothing wrong with this, blah, blah, blah. So I went through that whole process, and it took a while because it was extremely intense for me. But when that whole process was done, it's like I had this realization of, we have this dog. I'm perfectly capable of figuring out how to take care of it and have it fit into our lives. And whatever happens, happens. And it's like, once I got to that point, a lot of things in my life were better. Like I would think that way for lots of things until I know that certain things that would get me anxious do not get me anxious anymore. I just don't, even other people being anxious. Now I can look at them and be like, they're getting pretty anxious. Wonder what's going on there. I think I'm going to go over here and do this now. Like it just doesn't affect me the same way. And I am a firm believer in that. It was because I was able to move through that process, even though it took a while, and it normally doesn't take this long, but for me, it was very, very intense. And once I got through that and didn't really resist it, it was like, oh, I get it now, and everything just seemed calmer to the point where I can tell the difference between how I was and how I am now in terms of like how I process things and how my body feels. If I do start to get a little bit stressed, like I recognize it and I know what to do to be able to just feel it and have it just go away and not have it turn into something huge. Yeah.
So you can learn, identify it sooner. You can practice a few of the tips that we talked about here in the podcast today. Definitely, as your awareness grows, your ability to act differently in the moment strengthens. The more awareness you develop, and give yourself grace in that moment, because it takes time. You've been practicing. If you're a person that's been practicing this behavior for a long time, just becoming aware of it is huge. The more just seeing yourself in the moment, going, oh my gosh, like getting to that place where you can see it playing out is huge.
Yeah. And not judging yourself for it.
Right. Exactly.
Just recognizing it.
Exactly. I mean, the awareness afterward and being able to say, that situation yesterday, I wasn't functioning at my best, or this is what I might have done differently, or, again, giving yourself grace. You know what Oprah says? If you, now that you know better, do better.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it was Oprah. I think it was Toni Morrison that said that.
Okay.
But, you know better, do better.
Yeah. Right.
So that's all you can ask of yourself is to.
Right. And not in a judgy way, like you should have known better. It's just like, oh,
like you know better now.
Yeah. I did this thing this way. I didn't really like the way that felt or the way it came out. What can I do even just a little bit differently next time so I can feel better when it's over?
Right. Okay.
All right, my friends, we'll leave you with that.
Okay.
And we will
until next time, everyone.
Until next time.
Thank you so much for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to us if you like, subscribe, and share. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. This makes it easier for everyone to find us and helps us spread our message about self-care from the inside out. Have a wonderful week, and remember, making yourself the priority is the highest form of self-care.